Madam Mayor, we are now live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the full council at the London Borough of Hillingdon. The virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. And I would like to welcome all those members of the public who are joining us via that medium. My name is Councillor Teji Barnes, Mayor of Hillingdon, and as Mayor, I will be chairing the meeting. I have alongside me at a safe distance the Head of Democratic Services, Lloyd White. The rest of the members of the council are joining us from their homes. You are all very welcome. You may have noted from the agenda that we will shortly be conducting a roll call. Please refer to your agenda and order of business throughout the meeting, as it will help guide you through the business tonight. Before we start, I'd like to emphasise some important online housekeeping rules for everyone present. They are to remind everyone to please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent, to please keep your microphone muted when not speaking, and then unmute to speak only if called upon by myself or the Head of Democratic Services. Just imagine we are all in the council chamber. The same rules apply. That only one person should speak at a time. That the Code of Conduct rules apply equally to this virtual meeting as to when we meet in person. I expect an immaculate standard of behaviour. That if you are speaking tonight, and you should have already indicated to the Head of Democratic Services that you wish to do so, please keep it brief and to the point. The traditional timer is in operation at this end, and I will be reminding you when your time is almost up. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, for example, they've lost their connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which is 17 councillors. I will now move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, and ask the Head of Democratic Services to read out any apologies that they have received.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, councillors. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Agenda item 2. You would have received the minutes for the meeting held on the 10th of September 2020. I should take it that they are approved unless any member indicates otherwise.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 3. We are now going to move on to the roll call and declarations of interest. Lloyd White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, hopefully a process that most members are fairly familiar with by now. I shall call each member's name in alphabetical order, ask you to unmute your microphone, confirm that you are present for the recording, and state whether you have any declarations of interest to make on the agenda items before us tonight. If you have no declarations of interest, you don't need to state that, just say that you are present. Starting, therefore, with Councillor Ahmed Walana. Good evening.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold. There's a bit of interference on your line, Councillor Arnold, but I can see you speaking, so I know you're present. Councillor Bianco.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Birra.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Bliss.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bridges.
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Brightman.
Good evening, Lloyd, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows.
Good evening, Lloyd, I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Chapman.
Good evening, Lloyd. Yes, I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Chubadar.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Hello, Lloyd. I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cawthorne.
Good evening, Lloyd, and everyone. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curling.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor DeVille.
Evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon.
Evening, Lloyd. Evening, everybody. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Dott.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everyone. I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Edgington.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am also present.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, Lloyd, and everyone else. I am present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gardner. Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goddard.
Hello, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Hagger.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hensley.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
Good evening, all. I'm present, Lloyd.
Thank you. Councillor Horangi.
Lloyd, I think Councillor Harangi will be giving her apologies tonight, so I
okay.
should have said that earlier on.
All right. That's very kind of you. Thank you. That's duly noted. Councillor Kaufman.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lakmana.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Lewis does not appear to be with us at the moment. I'll try that again later. Councillor Makwana.
Good evening, all. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Markham.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Melvin.
Good evening, Lloyd. Good evening, everyone. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Milani.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas Mills.
I'm present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard Mills.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Money.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Morse. Councillor Morse.
Yeah. Yes, good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Nelson.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien.
Good evening, Lloyd. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Oswell.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present. And Councillor Gardner's link has just gone down. She's just sent me a message.
Okay, I'll hopefully she'll be able to rejoin.
Okay. Thanks, Lloyd.
Councillor Palmer.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Sir Ray Puddifoot.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Radia.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Rodriguez.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you so much. Councillor Sansapuri.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Seaman Digby.
Yeah, good evening. I'm present. Sorry, I was on mute.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Singh.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Stead. Councillor Stead, are you with us? Okay, we'll try that again in a bit. Councillor Sullivan.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Good evening. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Tuckwell.
Good evening, everybody. I am present.
Thank you. Councillor Yarrow.
Good evening, Lloyd. I'm present.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Good evening, Lloyd. I am present.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, who I can see next to me and has no declarations of interest. Can I just go back and check? Councillor Gardner, have you managed to rejoin?
Oh, I'm here. Can
Thank
anybody
you.
hear?
Yes. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Lewis, have you managed to join yet?
I have. By phone.
Great stuff. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And then that just left us with Councillor Stead, who I can't hear. Madam Mayor, can I also confirm that I believe the officers present are the Chief Executive, the Corporate Director of Finance, the Director of Environment, Education and Community Services, the Director of Building Services, Transport and Business Improvement, the Director of Corporate Resources and Services, the Borough Solicitor, myself, Mark Braddock, Nikki O'Halloran, Morgan Einan and Beth Rainey. Oh, and I think that, yes, I think that's it, unless there's another officer that I haven't spotted. Is the Corporate Director of Social Care here as well? Okay, thank you. That completes it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4 and the report from Democratic Services. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 2 parts to this report, and I will move the recommendations individually. The first part of the report requests temporary suspension of council procedure rules to facilitate the current council meeting being held in a virtual format. So the proposed change of rules relates only to this council meeting and is the same as agreed at the last virtual council meeting. The recommendation is that under Council Procedure Rule 26.1, Council agrees to temporarily suspend the specific council procedure rules set out in this report for the purpose of holding this virtual council meeting only. I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Bianco?
And I formally second and reserve my right.
As there are no other speakers notified, I will assume the recommendation is approved unless any member indicates that they wish to vote against. Thank you. We will go on to part 2. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The second part of the report provides details of decisions made using urgency procedures made since the last virtual council meeting on the 10th of September. The decisions are as recorded in the report. I move that these decisions are noted.
Thank you. This item for the recent urgent decisions has been noted. That takes us to agenda item 5 and my mayor's announcements. So with great sadness, I request that all members observe a 1-minute silence on behalf of the late Councillor Neil Fyfe, who only passed away a few days ago. Councillor Fyfe was a stalwart in Charville Ward from 2010 to 2020 and will be greatly missed here at the council. Our sincere condolences go to his wife Anna and their family. If members would prefer to stand for the 1-minute silence, then please feel free to do so now. Thanks. Around this time of the year, the Mayor would normally update all the members on how many events they have attended, which is normally in the hundreds. So I thought for a laugh I would do the same. With half a year already under my belt and starting in a lockdown, with restrictions eased and restrictions tightened, and then a second lockdown to work around, I had no idea what to expect regarding figures. So events attended in person, 111. Attended via Zoom and other online meets, 26. My YouTube presence only started in September, so since then to date, we have published 29 videos, 10 being the weekly updates. We now have 92 subscribers to the channel, with 4,053 views, a watch time of 157 hours, and impressions totaling at 15,700. I must say, I really didn't know what to expect, so I'm glad that I've been able to make some ripples. My role is about engaging with the people in the borough, and I am so pleased that I'm able to continue to do that via various means of communication. It is definitely not the same, but for now, it is exactly what is needed. Our next video will be showcasing the Christmas lights around the borough, so please do watch out for it for some Christmas cheer. We'll now go to part 2. We shall have the statement on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic by the leader of the council, Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're nearing the end of a year that has seen the coronavirus pandemic have a major effect on many people's lives across the country. Whilst we have needed to adapt and provide some services differently, the London Borough of Hillingdon has continued to deliver services to our residents since the start of the pandemic, and we continue to receive the thanks of our residents for the performance of our staff in many areas of service delivery. As I stated at the last council meeting, our ability to manage finance and business processes provided a firm base to enable us to deal with the pandemic at council level, and this continues to be the case. At the start of this financial year, we had budgeted to have just under £28 million in balances at the year end. However, by the end of September, we were showing a surplus of £2.5 million on the current year's budget, increasing our predicted year-end balances to £30.5 million. Our estimated COVID financial pressure at the end of September was £3.8 million, being the difference between our estimated additional costs and income loss and the funding receivable from government. Apart from our balances, we have a good level of other reserves which are earmarked for particular purposes, and £9.1 million has been earmarked to cover COVID costs. Whilst there will be an additional cost attributable to the current lockdown period, there is also further government funding available. Accordingly, there will be no financial problems in the current year due to our level of balances and earmarked reserves. We will, over the coming months, be reviewing our medium-term financial forecast to plan appropriately for the coming years. For the avoidance of doubt, I do not anticipate any reduction in service delivery. Whilst other regions of the country are now exceeding London as regards new COVID-19 cases, in Hillingdon, our case level has risen to place us 7th highest of the London boroughs. And between the 24th of March and the 18th of November, the number of death registrations which contained suspected COVID as the cause of death was 315. Accordingly, we cannot, as a council or as a community, become complacent. I would urge residents and businesses to continue following government guidelines. Last week, the council became part of the NHS tracing service. NHS Test and Trace will pass details to the council of residents who have tested positive, but who they have not been able to contact. Once in receipt of this information, the council will try to make contact either by text, phone or email or a visit to capture information about the residents' activities in the days prior to their positive result. It is anticipated that the temporary mortuary that was situated at Breaksbury Crematorium will be re-established in the coming weeks. We're also being asked to provide 2 vaccination hubs, and these will be at Ruislip Young People's Centre in Berry Street, Ruislip, and the William Byrd Pool in Victoria Lane, Harlington. We will continue to put the health and well-being of all our residents at the forefront of what we do. Our staff in all aspects of service, from social care to finance and administration, continue to deliver for our residents. And whilst having the best parks and open spaces and the best refuse and recycling service in the country is good news in normal times, it is now more important than ever. So, on behalf of the council and the residents that we represent, I would like to once again offer our thanks to the staff of this council for their continued dedication to delivering services to our residents. And again, as I said at the last council meeting, it is important that we continue to recognise the severity of the current situation and refrain from the traditional political knockabout activities and campaign, and concentrate all of our efforts, all of the council's efforts, on dealing with COVID-19 and its consequence for all of our residents. And I'm grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for his understanding and his support on this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 6 and questions from members. Members who are asking a question, please can you make sure that you read your question out in full. We're going to start with 6.3 and Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will the Cabinet member please provide details of national awards recently received by Hillingdon Waste and Recycling Service?
Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Rodriguez. You are, of course, referring to the Local Authority Recycling Advisory Committee Awards, or LARAC. Now, LARAC was formed in 1985 to represent the interests of local authorities on recycling, waste and resource management issues. Their annual celebration awards recognise their success and showcases best practice across the UK. Now, Hillingdon entered the 2020 Team of the Year category, highlighting our excellent work during the early months of lockdown to protect our frontline staff whilst continuing to provide waste services without disruption. Unlike most local authorities, we maintained all our weekly services when almost all other London boroughs suspended at least green waste collections for a period of time. All this at a time when volumes of domestic waste were increasing. Now, as I explained at the September meeting, this was achieved with the support of our passenger transport team. The awards themselves took place remotely on the 14th of October, and Hillingdon won their category, seeing off strong competition from Cheshire West and Chester, Newcastle under Lyme and West Berkshire local authorities. Madam Mayor, of course, as the leader has just said, the excellence of our waste recycling services team is no surprise to us and our residents. But the team are to be congratulated on this prestigious national recognition, which is so richly merited. On behalf of us all, my thanks to them, as always. Thank you.
Councillor Rodriguez, do you have a supplementary question for the Cabinet member?
No, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Question 6.1, Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is directed to the Cabinet Member for Education, Children and Youth Services, Councillor O'Brien. Why is the Council proposing to build the new secondary school in Ruislip when there is a greater need for more secondary places in the south of the borough, which is the area which has far fewer and very limited unfilled Year 7 places in the schools compared to schools in the north of the borough, where there is a greater child yield and overall population density, as is evidenced by the attached map from the Residents, Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee meeting of the 15th of October 2020, agenda item 9, entitled Quarterly School Places Update, showing Year 7 offers to secondary schools in September 2020, where there is currently an extremely limited choice for parents living in the south of the borough, which has necessitated the need for many parents applying for and gaining up to 7 forms of entry of places in out-borough schools, and where the thousands of planned additional housing units are likely to increase the child population in the south of the borough even further, especially in the light of the increased housing density requirements of the quite recently adopted Hillingdon Local Plan Part 2, which is expected to bring forth more housing capacity to this area.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I respond?
Yes, sorry, I was having problems with my computer. Yes, Councillor O'Brien, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this response is to Councillor Sweeting. As many members will know, last week a paper went to Cabinet regarding the site of a new secondary free school. To me, a very comprehensive and well-explained report. Within the paper, it was made clear that the proposal for a new free school in the north of the borough was being directed by the Department for Education and not Hillingdon Council. Any newly built school must now legally be a free school. Free schools are funded directly by the government and are not run by the local authority. Typically, a free school is an academy type school, which has its own direction and autonomy. The DfE identifies a need for a new school within its forward plan. Bids are invited and decided by the DfE, who manage and fund the programme for free schools. Like many other local authorities in London, Hillingdon has experienced a significant rise in demand for school places over the last decade and more. The council has a statutory obligation to offer every child who is resident within the borough a school place who needs one. To meet the needs of residents, the council has been very successful in its Building Schools for the Future programme, delivering a multi-million-pound school expansion programme to expand forms of entries to primary schools across the borough, including the provision of 3 new primary schools. This has been one of the largest school expansion programmes in London. The number of pupils needing a primary school place from one year to the next has now largely stabilised, but remains consistently high. The increased demand for new school places has now moved into the secondary sector, and the council has already successfully expanded a number of existing schools. In the north of the borough, this includes rebuilding and expanding Northwood School, expanding Viner School and Ruislip High School, which was in itself a new build back in 2006. In addition, Oakwood School and Swateley School in the centre of the borough have been rebuilt and expanded. The council is currently working with the DfE to expand Harlington School in the south of the borough, which is progressing. Given the rising demand for school places, in 2016, the DfE invited bids for secondary free schools in Hillingdon and agreed 2 bids. Both were for the north of the borough. No bids for secondary free schools were received and approved by the DfE for the south of the borough. More recently, the DfE reviewed the school expansion in the borough and the adjacent areas and decided to progress with just 1 bid. The DfE chose Bishop Arden from the Veritas Academy Trust, which oversees Bishop Ramsay School. A new school from an outstanding provider will increase the total number of school places and choice available across the borough. Education case law is clear that parents can freely choose to apply for any school at any preference. There are more secondary schools in the south of the borough which provide local choice for local families. Once a child reaches secondary school, distances become less of a priority, and most Hillingdon secondary pupils travel within a reasonable distance from home to school. This reflects each family's own reason, including preferences for selective and faith schools, which can mean a longer travel distance from home to school for these pupils based on their choice of school, which some families are prepared to do. As I said earlier, it is the council's statutory duty to have a school place available for every child who resides in the borough. Therefore, the council officers forensically scrutinises, reviews and updates its school places forecast using population data forecasts from the GLA, as well as new housing development data to ensure it can meet its obligations. The need for additional primary and secondary school places remains constantly under review, looking at the final educational census figures that report back every October, taking into account changing birth rates, migration, changes in the economy, which may affect the choices families make about where they live, as well as the impact of new residential developments. Finally, what families do want is good quality educational provision, and Hillingdon aims to provide that. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeting, do you have a supplementary question for Councillor O'Brien?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. I thank the Cabinet member for the information provided. However, it does not seem to take into account the very latest statistical information on the school places issue, which actually shows only 2 schools in the north of the borough, 2 primary schools in the north of the borough with rising rolls, compared to 7 with falling rolls. And this compares to 9 in the south of the borough with rising rolls. And therefore my follow-up question is this. As the most recent pupil roll projections reported to the Respot Committee are still indicating a significant shortfall of places, even with the new school and the expansion of Harlington, if the council is to heed government recommendations of leaving 5% of places unfilled to allow for some choice for parents, will the council now work constructively with government, the Department for Education and others to seek to provide a second new secondary school in the south of the borough, so that parents living in the south of the borough will no longer need to seek places at schools in the north of the borough or at out-borough schools due to lack of places and choice, as is currently the situation?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeting. I can only at this moment in time reiterate that obviously we are constantly forensically looking at forecasts. As you know, we have to have a place for every child. What we can do is take your question away and look at it and investigate it further, and we'll see how we move forwards from there. But this is constantly under review, Councillor Sweeting. Thank you.
I thank you very much, Councillor.
Question 6.2, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Deputy Leader of the Council and the Cabinet Member for Finance, Property and Business Services, Councillor Bianco. Could the Cabinet Member please give us his annual update on the success or otherwise of the Borough in this year's awards of green flags? Thank you.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Morgan. It is, as Councillor Morgan says in his question, an annual update, and it's one we've been pleased and proud to present every year because it is a fantastic good news story for the residents of this borough. This year, again, we have seen an increase in the number of green flags from a previous record of 55 to a new record of 60. So 5 new parks and open spaces have been granted green flag status this year. The parks in question, excuse me, are Fairway Recreation Ground, Stonefield Park, Field End Recreation Ground, Highgrove Woods and Hale Field Park. Interestingly, these are a wide variety of different spaces, and to pick out 2, Hale Field Park was only open to the public in the summer of 2019 as part of a planning agreement with Stockley Park Development. This was previously derelict land and was rejuvenated by Prologis as part of their works and was handed back to the council as public amenity space. So to have acquired a green flag for this new park so quickly is really very exciting. The other one I wanted to highlight was Field End Rec, where we have undertaken a number of ecological and recreational improvements in recent years. In particular, provision of a new skate park for our younger, mainly our younger audience, residents, and last autumn, the planting of 5,000 new trees, with trees in conjunction with the organisation Trees for Cities. This is a really exciting move forward. I think looking at the picture slightly more widely, there are a number of things I'd like to say in connection with this, and that is that these 60 green flag open spaces really do underline this council's commitment to the green environment and to our residents. Looking at
looking at this last year, where we have suffered 2 lockdowns, we're hopefully coming out of the second one shortly. These open spaces, these green areas, have provided to our residents fantastic facilities, particularly during the first lockdown, which went on for some considerable period during very nice weather. It enabled them to get outside, and for those residents without their own private outdoor spaces, gardens, etc., these spaces have been a lifeline. The other thing I thought was of note, there's often criticism that this council favours the north of the borough over the south. And I thought I'd do a quick calculation and tell you that of these 60 green flag parks, 22 reside north of the A40 and 38 south. So I think that dismisses that argument on these grounds, certainly. What is also important to understand is that these 60 parks are re-evaluated every year. And so therefore the fact that we have held on to these, each flag, and we haven't lost one en route, it does show our this level of service. It is a real tick box as to the quality of the environment in these communities as well. To thank our green spaces teams for the hard work they've carried out, and also local residents who in many park cases also contribute to the work needing to be done. I look forward, Madam Mayor, to working with you in the new year, weather and lockdown permitting, to raise the flags in these new parks. Thank you, Councillor Morgan, for your question.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, do you have a supplementary question for Councillor Bianco?
Madam Mayor, no, I do not have a follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We go on to 6.4 and Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Cabinet Member for Education, Children and Youth Services. Can the Cabinet Member please tell us how the Council has supported schools to return in the next academic year?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for your question as well. Following the closure of schools earlier this year in line with government lockdown guidance and their subsequent partial reopening, the Council has supported all schools in the borough to successfully open fully and safely for all pupils from the start of the new year in September. A wide range of Council services have supported this effort. This has included advice, support and keeping lines of communication and engagement open for schools. Some examples are providing timely advice and guidance to all head teachers in the borough to ensure compliance with changing government guidelines. Many of us will be aware that this was ever changing very regularly before the summer to keep children who needed to be in school able to do so. Supporting schools to complete risk assessments before the start of the new school year and to make changes to the way the schools operate to minimise the risk of infection, including staggering start and finish times, enhancing cleaning regimes and providing pavement distant markers outside school premises. Making PPE available to all schools irrespective of their designation. Providing regular communications and briefings with head teachers and school governors. Promoting walking and cycling to school to reduce the need to use public transport wherever possible. Delivering a communications campaign to residents in line with the government message on children returning to school following the summer break, to ensure as many pupils as possible returned to the classroom. Providing advice and guidance to schools to access national and local resources and technology offers to ensure schools are fully equipped to provide home learning arrangements with pupils who could not be in school. For those occasions when children need to self-isolate, the Council has worked with schools to ensure vulnerable children and those from low-income families have access to IT equipment. That was back in July 2020 when we rolled that out, and to continue learning from home. close monitoring of pupil attendance, working with schools and social care services to ensure children are in school whenever possible. The council continues to work closely with all schools in the borough to keep schools open and safe in line with government guidelines. In all Hillingdon Council continues to be committed to putting residents first and has worked tirelessly during the pandemic to keep essential council services running for residents and businesses during this difficult time, adhering strictly to government COVID-19 guidance whilst helping to keep their residents safe. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, do you have a supplementary question for the Cabinet Member?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So we will now move on to agenda item 7 and the motion for the evening. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, river flooding, road safety, community facilities, climate change and other issues were so close to residents' hearts that they have petitioned the council online. However, 47% of the non-planning and licensing related petitions in the last 2 years did not meet the 100 signature threshold. It's not the fault of the concerned residents, but significantly because of our petitions, policies and procedures. So river flooding, road safety, community facilities, climate change and other significant issues at this point in time would not be brought to our Cabinet members' petition hearings. However, if those issues, as some may have, are submitted by paper, they would be, because in these petitions, they achieve double the number of signatures of the paper thresholds. Our current petition system means resident signatures on a non-planning and licensing paper petition is 5 times more powerful than a legitimate hillingdon.gov petition made online to Cabinet members. We do have a policy that means planning and licensing has parity online and on paper, so why not all petitions? This motion has been put to enable the council the opportunity to put our residents first. To put our residents first in making it easy as possible for them to engage with democratic processes of this council to take part in all petition issues, whether online or offline. And especially during these times of coronavirus pandemic, where we've seen a shift in our country's working, a move from office to home, a move from paper to virtual. And yes, there are pros and cons to both of these ways of engaging people. But in a new post-corona world, there emerges residents' expectations that will be different, and expectations on how we operate as a council will be different too. Residents are more likely to access virtual engagement with us. Many of us already have social media profiles and understand the importance of a virtual presence. But this is not new. The move on to online working has already been going and increasing at a fast pace. And the council has put many of its messaging on social media to spread its word, as well as Hillingdon people, as well as putting its services online rather than face-to-face or by phone. There is urgency in this motion, as COVID-19 means we need to urgently equip our residents to safely undertake petitions, doing this online rather than face-to-face and assisting them to exercise their democratic rights without risk. The council's petition guidance says that e-petitions to Cabinet members are compiling signatures on an e-petition is much easier than a paper petition. I would dispute this. In non-COVID times, it's much easier to print off a form and get a few neighbours to sign it to reach 20 signatures, rather than encourage 100 of your online friends, many of whom may not be in your street or your area. So, for example, if you're trying to get an issue on your street resolved, it is unrelatable. How many people here have 100 signatures, have 100 emails of their neighbours, or have them all on Facebook to be able to engage them with a concern, if in fact you live on a street with 100 people? Finally, we will be making our petitions online processes much easier for residents. This motion calls for a review to make online processes more accessible, and there are some suggestions. The review conclusions are rightly with the Cabinet. However, having recently supported a resident to be a lead petitioner online, it isn't as simple as it could be. The fact the platform is on the old version of the website and it requires an additional login than you would use for the libraries or for your Hillingdon First card makes it extremely difficult, especially for those who are warming up to getting used to a virtual world. I would ask that the Cabinet consider maybe as well posting responses or outcomes to petitions in a similar way to the parliamentary setup and other boroughs.
1 minute left, Councillor Mathers.
As this time allows, and in the spirit of us recognising the online presence tonight, and for those watching YouTube, I will read the motion. This council believes it is important to engage residents in local decision making. Making it and acknowledging the pandemic, it makes it understandably more difficult for residents to engage local democratic processes. This council recognises the importance of resident petitions in playing a valuable part in enabling residents to resolve the issues and concerns they face within the borough. Therefore, this council resolves to reduce the qualifying criteria of the number of required signatures for online petitions from 100 to the current level of paper petitions, which is 20. And further instructs the Cabinet to undertake an urgent review to enable online petitions process to be made accessible as possible. And then it provides 2 examples. Madam Mayor, in summary, now the world has changed, the council needs to adapt and change also. And this is the opportunity to do so.
Councillor Mathers, you have run out of time. Could you formally move your motion, please?
Sorry, I move. I said it as we were speaking. Apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
Hello, I second that motion and reserve my right.
Thank you. We'll go on to other speakers that are noted. Councillor Eggington.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The system of petitions is here to allow groups of individuals to express their views and, on occasion, to be able to improve the services and environment within the borough. Many people don't like being criticised, but by seeking to impose rules to reduce that criticism, it is often seen as a demonstration of arrogance and an unwillingness to accept that other people can have valid opinions. We can see that issue by considering the attitude of leaders on the other side of the Atlantic. Over the past 6 years, this council has made a series of restrictions to the petition scheme. Examples have included the withdrawal of the rights of people working or studying in Hillingdon. Now, although that might be thought as not affecting our residents, indirectly it does, because those of our residents who work or study in a neighbouring area will lose their right to support or initiate a petition there. The change to the number of signatures required for an online petition, other than planning or licensing, is currently discriminating against those who are extremely vulnerable and unable to meet petitioners before discussing and signing. At the very least, some dispensation needs to be accepted for the period of the pandemic. And that is the purpose of this motion. I urge all to support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, you were down to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. COVID-19 has changed all our lives in some ways, and it has been necessary for the government to enact legislation and for all public bodies to embrace new practices in carrying out their duties. At present, it is sometimes difficult for residents' collective voices to be heard, as so much face-to-face contact has been discouraged and now in lockdown is against the law. Residents wishing to petition about an issue of concern have been and are restricted in how to do this. During lockdown, going door to door with a petition is not possible, and we should not be encouraging people to do this. E-petitions are the obvious answer, but requiring 100 signatures is onerous. And do we want this anyway? If there are residents in an area wanting to request traffic calming or road safety improvements, are we really saying they must get 100 signatures before we will consider their representations as a petition? Surely we want to know who is affected and where and by how much. If 20 signatures on an e-petition can be considered as a petition, we are more likely to hear of true issues of concern and be allowing a safe access to democratic rights of expression for all residents. Recently in West Drayton, we had flooding, rendering over 40 residents homeless. There is great concern about this in the ward, and residents have come together to send in a paper petition with over 270 names. This was collected just before lockdown, but we were aware even then of the rising transmission numbers of the virus, and that despite masks and distancing, residents may be in a situation of risk in collecting signatures of people who wanted to sign. It is far easier and safer for residents who have an underlying health condition or are in a vulnerable group to sign an e-petition, and we should be encouraging this. We want to hear residents' views, not put obstacles in their way.
You have
And I'm
1 minute
afraid the
left.
100 signatures required for an e-petition is too great a number and should be reduced to 20, the same as paper petitions. I ask all councillors to support this motion in the interests of all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. We should now move to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we are debating the single motion of the evening. I accept Councillor Mathers' motion is obviously what the Labour Group considers to be the council's democratic process, a problem facing the council's democratic process today. But the motion suggests that we should be allowing those who are starting or signing a petition not to have to register with Hillingdon. Well, in fact, if you feel so strongly about not registering with Hillingdon, you can simply set up and submit a change.org petition instead. The e-petition system is working well, and I say this because since the start of the pandemic in March, up to last Thursday, we have received 29 e-petitions, which is actually an increase of over 70% over the same period in 2019. 1,222 people up to last Thursday had signed these petitions without any problem or complaint. The system provides the lead petitioner with a link to the page on the council's website that they can simply forward on by email or through social media. This link is passed electronically from person to person, who I assume share the same views, and so allows most people to easily find, register and sign the petition. Why do we ask people to register? Well, as far as I'm aware, all properly run petitions ask you to register in order to prevent anyone who feels very strongly about an issue signing the same petition multiple times. One vote or one signature per person seems sensible to me, and this is the tenet that sits at the very heart of a democracy and ensures that no one person should have more sway or influence over a decision than anyone else. I've asked comms when petitions will be modified over the old style forms
1 minute,
to a more
Councillor
modern
Lewis.
format. Thank you. And whilst they are working on it, there are some technical difficulties to be overcome due to public access of the secure local government app called ModGov. In the meantime, I went online myself this afternoon, typed in the petition on the new Hillingdon homepage, and was immediately given access to the template for a paper petition, clear, simple information on how to register and set up an e-petition, and how to find an existing petition to sign. I accept that it's on the old style format, but truthfully it works, and it works well, and it's slowly but surely being updated to a more modern look. Quite frankly, Madam Mayor, I think this should have been a question to me, which I would have been more than happy to explain. In conclusion, to my mind, it's a system that is actually working quite well and should be considered as a case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's for these reasons, Madam Mayor, that I and my colleagues will be voting against the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you reserve your right earlier. This is now your time to speak. Councillor Allen, you're on mute.
There you go. Thank you. I'm seconding this motion tonight because to get 20 signatures on a paper for something residents really care about can take time. Some time that residents, often their busy lives, do not have, but it makes a big difference. To get 100 signatures online requires a resident to go out and tell residents and people where it is online, and in today's climate, that would be foolish. Not everybody has 100 friends, residents they know email address. Just like as many residents do not know where to find the petitions online, and this is something the council should be looking at. Petitions come through, none of them the same: a rowdy house, a request for a crossing, pollarding of trees, road improvements, noise nuisance, to name but a few, and they affect a different number of people each time. For this reason, we're calling today for some equal footing, because if a resident can get a piece of paper and get 20 signatures, and yet another resident has to have 100 signatures online, that is not equality. And Hillingdon Council prides itself in putting residents first, residents as equals. So I'm asking you to support this motion. I've listened to what Councillor Lewis says, and I think, you know, he's been a bit fanciful with his words. I think I'm asking residents of fair mind, all the councillors to be of fair mind and give every resident equal footing. Thank you. Support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a shame that the motion has been misunderstood by the Cabinet member and the Conservative group. The examples that are stated are simply just that, examples of which the Cabinet, who have the complete control of this review, could choose to take or leave. For this to be a reason not to support the motion is not the intention of myself, as the Cabinet does have the final say. The real issue is the threshold numbers, which weren't mentioned. And this is where the Council needs to agree to change of policy, hence the motion. The numbers need to be changed in order for it to be COVID adapted, COVID secure, and that is our principal concern for the residents of Hillingdon. This motion has been put to enable the Council the opportunity to put residents first. I hope that it is still supported by all. This motion has been put to make it as easy as possible for residents to engage with the democratic processes of this Council, whether online or offline, and there is still work to be done, as admitted. This motion has been put to ensure that there is parity between the petition system and there isn't bias or favour or just simply a disregard for the online approach to democracy. This motion has been put to support our residents to be able to safely engage with democracy during the pandemic, our first and foremost priority. So now as our world is changed and we need to change and adapt to put residents first, I ask that all councillors support this motion.
Thank you. We will now go to vote on the motion. Leader of the Council, Councillor Puddifoot, on behalf of the Conservative group, how do you vote on the motion?
We vote against the motion, Madam Mayor.
Leader of the Labour group, Councillor Curling, on behalf of the Labour group, how do you vote on the motion?
The Labour group votes in favour of the motion, Madam Mayor.
If there are any other members who wish to vote differently to that indicated by their group leaders, please indicate now verbally or virtually. The motion falls. End of the item, and that brings us to the end of the ordinary full council meeting. As a reminder, do not unmute yourselves while leaving the meeting, as the live stream has not been turned off yet, and what you say will be heard and may be recorded. I wish you all a pleasant evening, and we'll see you at the next ordinary meeting of the full council on the 14th of January 2021. Meeting closed.